Grown-ups still are inclined to take the author's words as final, but not the younger readers of our day. Ever After and their restless imaginations can cover such a multitude of adventures, trials, and happy events. So these young readers, may their tribe increase, sit themselves down, take a pen in hand, and write the author to find out what exactly did become of everyone, including the goats and kittens, until the day he died. If I remember correctly, and authors too often have bad memories, Heidi Grows Up, which I wrote as the sequel to Madame Spyri's much-loved story Heidi, ended with Heidi and Peter's wedding day. They are watching the sun as it sank to rest beneath the darkening hills of Thorfell, and if my memory does not betray me, Heidi was allowing Peter to have the last words. It is a promise. And Peter, but however many times it may return, it will never see a happier day than this. I can see now that Heidi's children is finished, that I've made a prevaricator out of Peter, for there were many, many happier days in store for both of them. It had been a pleasure for those who had shared those days, and many and all of you who have written me to ask whether Heidi or Peter ever had any children of their own. A few days ago, the mother of a little girl who I had been reading these very pages which you are now about to read, asked me a question which I have been turning over thoughtfully in my mind. She asked me whether Joanna Spyri maybe did not disapprove, were she alive, if the library had taken these books and interpreting for the children of today what the happy ever after might have meant in life for Heidi. In the first place, I knew Madame Spyri well as one human, even of a different race, could know another. Every book she wrote was a labor of love for the children she knew so well. Each one was written in memory of that little lost one who used to ask her to tell him what lay behind forever after. I know that she never refused to grant a child's wish as long as she lived, so I went to my desk and showed the mothers some hundreds and hundreds of children's letters that have come to me since Heidi Grows Up was published. Truly, said the mother, Heidi belongs to all those little children from those faraway places. Not just the little Heidi, but the Heidi who grew up to find such fine girlhood, to become such a proud young wife, and such a wise and happy mother. So, let's go into our first chapter. Springtime in Dorfly. Chapter 1. Dorfly was still enveloped in a mantle of snow, but the baker, returning from Mainfield in his wagon, reported that down in the valley it was already spring. Nowhere was this news received more joyfully than the old manor house at the end of the crooked village street. Opening one of the large windows which looked towards the valley, Heidi rested her elbows and still gazed on the sill and gazed out. It might be true that down there are flowers that were already blooming in the fields. Blossoms were on the trees, little rivulets running through the snow and ice as it started to melt. Here she could see nothing of this, but there was spring in the air. Every breath of it was sweet. Presently, Heidi withdrew, leaving the window open, but in another moment she reappeared at the door wearing stout boots, her head uncovered. The longing could no longer be denied. She must go down the road, into the fields, to the edge of the forest, and she must go to meet the spring. To be sure, she was no longer the little girl of yesterday, but she had kept her gaiety, passion for nature, her childlike excitement for changing seasons. Following the road down to Mainfield, she happily said to herself, if I could meet spring, how happy I shall be. Today she thought spring as the gay messenger boy, smiling, she imagined him. It's a beautiful green apple suit with daisies studding his shoes, as it says in the song. Just at the turn of the road, where there was a large open place, Heidi saw the first flower. Almost hidden in the bank, ecstasy filled her, which it is true. The long winter had passed, and spring would come, one of the greatest joys that a young wife could experience, for both Peter and Heidi felt that no marriage was complete until it was blessed with children. Spring held this promise. Even at the wedding, the great event that had been prepared, the cradle had stood ready. It was custom. Often, the Christians' weddings, a cradle was prepared and a child walked with the bride and groom carrying wheat. This is a sign that the marriage would be fruitful, that there would soon be children. Now Heidi's cherished wish was to come true, and with the first strawberry blossoms, she looked forward to hold the baby in her arms. Never had she known such joy as she surged over as she beheld the first delicate snowdrops. Anemones, golden coltsfoot blossoms, whole fields of crocuses, the strawberry blooms that would soon follow. And with summer, she might be able to get to close up to the great manor house to take her baby up to the chalet on the elm. There the high slopes would be crimson, and the glorious alpine roses and every breath of refreshing mountain air would be perfumed with fragrance. It was on the elm that Heidi had spent the happiest days of her childhood. It was there she had met Peter. Neither of them could imagine living anything better than living there with children of their own. Now Heidi looked up to the elm where a hut was still deep in the snow, light snowflakes still falling. But they melted in the sun before they touched the ground. Yes, spring was really coming. And with every patch of green, Heidi beheld the miracle taking place before her eyes. As the clock and church steeple struck 4, Heidi turned back towards Dorfly. School would be out, and if she hurried, she might meet Jamie, the schoolmistress, and tell her the delightful news of the first spring flowers. Children trooped past her on the road, and she hailed them with "Spring is coming! If you look closely, you may see a flower along the roadside." She reached the schoolhouse just as Jamie was leaving, and the two friends walked together as far as the post office, where Jamie stopped for her mail. Jamie, or Jean Marie, had been christened and was native of Hungary, but had lived a good part of her life in France and also in Vaud, the French-speaking canton of the southern-western Switzerland. Heidi had met her at school near Lausanne, where she had been educated. Heidi's godfather, the good doctor from Frankfurt, had sent her so that she might take violin lessons and improve her French. But Dorfly was home, and Heidi had returned to teach the same village school where Jamie now taught, and later marry her playmate, Peter the goatherd, and take care of her grandfather, who was old and needed her. Shortly after her marriage, the doctor had been suddenly taken ill. His last wish had been that Heidi should have the house where she and her grandfather and what they liked to call their winter quarters, and the rest of the fortune went to the adopted son, Shayla, who was now studying art in Paris. The doctor's house was large, and at first the possession had only confused Heidi. The bare floors, the wide halls echoed her footsteps, and the place seemed peculiarly empty without the doctor. The wind whistled and blew through the cracks, and in more remote portions of the house she had ever entered these rooms, Heidi soon found herself flying towards her old winter quarters, which included the kitchen, all of the rooms. The kitchen seemed the least changed by death of the doctor. Bridget, Peter's capable mother, had considered it her kingdom, but it was good to find her stirring batter or putting potatoes to boil, just as she used to do. For Bridget had kept the house for the doctor and his adopted son, and now Jamie had boarded with them. Now she continued to board with Peter and Heidi. Nothing was really changed in the house, only the kindly spirit of the doctor had gone out of it. Boarding the schoolmistress was considered a great privilege in Dorfly, as the manor house was by far the finest in the little hamlet. Heidi spoken of as the fortunate godchild, the villagers had little else to take up their thoughts. They often gathered in groups and discussed the past and present and future of the manor house and its occupants. There was such a group around the post office that when Jamie came out and joined Heidi, who had been waiting for her at the steps, in Jamie's hand was a letter bearing a French stamp. "You've heard from your father?" asked one of the more curious villages. It had been well known to all of them that Jamie's father had recently been appointed the Hungarian military attaché in Paris. It was also suspected that he did not altogether approve of the position his daughter had expected as teacher in the little mountain hamlet. "No," Jamie replied. "This letter is not from my father. I am afraid he's much too busy to write." And then she pulled Heidi along until they had passed the group, stopping under the beech tree, which was already beginning to show a few leaf buds. She added, "It isn't for Mama either. She never bothers to write. It's for Marta, my little sister." "Is anything wrong?" Heidi asked. Anxiously, she had not forgotten the delicate 8-year-old child who had come to Dorfley for her wedding and stayed time at the Fracas Spa to bathe in the thermal water and grow strong. "Her health is all right, if that's what you mean, but, well, something else is wrong. Here, read it for yourself, and you'll see." And with that, Jamie handed Heidi the letter. "Dear sister, we're here in Paris, staying in a big hotel, and I'm lonely. Mama told Papa that they could go out and have good times, except for me. The nurses leave me every time I get sick because I can't help screaming and it scares them. Papa told Mama that I could be put in a Swiss school, and if you write, maybe they'll put me there. Then I can be near you. I won't scream. I promise. And I won't get sick. Could I go to the school you teach? Mama says now you're a peasant, and I think I'd like that. It would be like the wedding. Please write and say you'll take me. Someone has to want me." And here the page was quite smudged, as tears had fallen onto it. Underneath, the child simply signed her name. That was all that was there in the letter. It was written in French, badly spelled, filled with erasures and smudges, but Heidi could easily read it. The pathetic appeal went straight to her heart. "Well, of course she'll stay with us. We want her." "I knew you'd say that," Jamie answered, squeezing Heidi's hand. "But will Peter like it? And what about your grandfather? He's old and the house should be quiet. It's true that Marta does have screaming spells, and it seems nothing to comfort her. And what will Bridget think about a strange child into coming the family when you soon will be having a little one of your own?" "How can that matter?" Heidi cried, her face beaming with happy. "I've always wanted a little girl to mother, and if this child needs a home, I see no reason why she shouldn't have a home with us. Grandfather is fond of children, and Peter's mother dotes on them. She's never quite forgiven Peter for growing up." Jamie had to laugh at this. Bridget still called her son Pietrelli, even though after he was 6 feet tall and strong and brown as a chestnut. She'll be baking little cakes for Marta and knitting mittens when the cold comes again. And "Oh, Jamie," explained Heidi, her plans mounting still higher, "we can take her up to the elm with us this summer, and she can play in the pasture just as I used to do. We're going up as soon as baby comes and grandfather's strong again. That's what I love about spring. It's full of promises. Marta can spend every day in sunshine, and by end of summer she'll be so well you'll hardly know her." I knew something good was about to happen. I felt it in the air the moment I opened the window. You remember how it was with Clara? Why, even she learned to walk because of the high pastures. There isn't anything too good to happen on the elm. If you can give Marta part of your faith in these mountains and the Lord that made them, that will help," said Jamie thoughtfully. "She's timid, and perhaps you've noticed how she shrinks away from everybody as though she were afraid of being hurt. And she seems to take no pleasure whatsoever in the beautiful scenery around Lake and Vaude. She's never been that way since Grandma died, and no longer the loving care she needed. She still had her mother." "I know," Jamie replied sadly, "but Mama is so nervous, and I told you how she was when we were in school. She and Marta fight in each other. I've seen how neither of them can stand the sight of tears. I've tried to be close to her, but we've separated more, and most of the